and welcome back to this edition of Philosophy and Metaphysics of Divination. We talked a little bit about the psychology of it all last time. This time I'd like to get into another aspect of the psychology, most specifically language. Terence McKenna once said that the universe is not made of matter or energy, and that the universe is made of language. Well, that's a really interesting perspective when it comes to divination, because it's essentially information that we're trying to get as diviners. And basically, if the world is made of language, in other words, if the world is made of information, then our relationship with reality is a lot closer than first meets the eye. So first things first. One of the really interesting things about language and humanity, it can be said that humans don't necessarily live in their bodies. We don't live in our brains. We live in our minds. We live in our language. We live essentially in the way that we express the realities that our bodies or that our senses give to us. We are essentially beings of mind and not necessarily beings of matter or energy, for that matter. An interesting book to read on that topic is called "The Man Who Mistook His Wife for His Hat." Forget if that's the exact title, but it's a fascinating book. I forget the author, but I might reference that right afterwards. Now, just to give some examples about language, one interesting thing is the whole thing about how, I don't know how many of my viewers speak more than one language, but each language itself is a unique reality. Even if some words will have translatable meanings, it's never the exact meaning that is translated. So if we say a car in English will be very different from une auto in French, which is exactly the same. I would say the two labels that point toward the same thing, which is a car, but they are lived out and they are experienced very differently by the speakers of the language, basically. So that goes to say that language or a symbol is not just a label, but is also a carrier of information in and of itself. It's carrier at least of an experience, or it tends towards an experience from one speaker to the next. So, well, that's the whole question of cultures, by the way. I guess pretty much everybody wants to guess that, different cultures, different experiences and understandings of reality, and all of that is supported by a common language. Now, here's the thing: when it comes to divination, it's very, very close to language, most notably because some of the most popular methods of divination are directly linked to language. We could think about tarot and the runes. In tarot, each of the major arcana, is based on a Hebraic letter, and each rune is also a letter. The idea is that reality itself, when we express it with words, with our language, that can be brought down into simpler parts, which are words, and each of those words come from fundamental characteristics or fundamental characters, fundamental building blocks, which are letters, and the combining of the letters kind of make up all of the words, make up all of the language, which basically from those basic building blocks is all of reality built up and created. So this whole idea of tarot being based on letters, the combination of letters, you're playing with the building blocks of reality in order to get out the elements of reality that you need. Very similar with the runes, where the whole idea, rune means secret, and each one of the runes is of course also a building block of reality. The Norse went a little further down. that road because they were experts in, they were the first guys who invented cryptography. Those were the people who had a lot of fun with riddles, a lot of fun with word games, with puzzles, with puns, and encoding the runes in different ways. I remember reading someplace that one of the ways to court women was to send your love letter in a cryptic way, and if she was able to decode your code too easily, well, she was worthy of your intelligence. And if it was way too easy to decode, well, she would not give heed to simplistic mind who can't even code his secrets, his runes properly. Now, if we go to the, if we go a little further down, this whole idea about language being the building blocks of reality, I'm going to go a little further down the rabbit hole, and I'm going to compare epistemology to monotheism. Now, when we grow up, we're told about this thing that the world, there is this one objective reality that exists, and we are there to discover it. So all of our language, it's basically arbitrary labels that are meant to describe this one reality. But because we are limited subjective beings, our labels or our scientific instruments can't pry this one objective true reality well enough to actually give total meaning. And this idea is very similar to monotheism. You know, there's one God, there's one reality, and the word of God is eternal and immutable, just like the laws of nature. They are set in stone. Those are fundamental laws of physics, and they can't be broken because things always happen that way, because there is one objective reality, one coherence, one truth that that we need to discover. And so if for example the world is made of energy and matter, then of course divination is a means of using language in order to be in relationship with that unattainable universal truth, which is objective reality, which is the thing that is real, the thing that is there. And if the universe is made of language, then of course divination is basically a discourse. It's a conversation between our divination method and this truth, which is true, which is objective, which is there, which is out there, and that can be reached and accessed. So we kind of go get that information. Now here's the thing. When it comes to this whole thing about reality, with this one objective reality, once again, I was going to say that's a question of monotheism, but it can also be looked at in a different way. What if instead of having this one thing that was infinitely divided or infinitely separated and that we had to reach out towards it, what if instead of having one matrix of reality, there was an infinity of ontological points? So basically, religiously, that's similar to Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law, when he says every man and every woman is a star. In other words, every single point of reality is its own existent self. It's not dependent on this, or it's not a part of this whole matrix. It's not a part of this one thing. There is an infinite number of real truthful points, real truthful perspectives of reality, real truthful beings, basically. And this ontological point, and by ontological point I mean the part of being which is the infinitesimally small, which is indivisible, which is the infinite number of non-local, incalculably small points. But each and every one of these points can be considered real. Every single human can be considered a real human, and not just some manifestation of what is some matrix of energy and matter that just happened to organize that way. But it's actually a real person, a real subjective experience, a real center of the universe. And every one of those points is, of course, the center of the universe if we remember what I was talking about in the last video, the continuum between infinitely small and infinitely big. Wherever we are, we're always at the center. And so everything that is real is the center of the universe, is the center of itself. Now, instead of having this one matrix with this one set of rules, it turns out that we end up with an infinite number of points, and the set of rules become determined, become built on the relationships that the points have with each other. Reality, or objective reality, then becomes an emergent property of the relationships between all of these points, who basically have to come into relationship with each other in order to create more and more complex existence, or to have more complex experience at that point. Otherwise, they're just, little points with mathematical vector calculations banging into each other, perhaps. But in the other perspective, when they have a network of relationships built around that point, you can have the human experience with the point of existence in relationship with all other points of existence that create this wonderful complex reality that we know. And what does that have to do with divination? Well, once again, it's a world made of language. If it's a world made of ontological points, then reality is made up of relationships. It's actually what counts is the relationships between what I would say between different points that create reality. And the act of divination is basically you're setting up this relationship, you're entering a relationship and having a dialogue with it to really get that information out and bring it towards you. And divination, essentially, it's a language in and of itself, but that's not necessarily a language of words and words and sentences. It's a language of images. It's a language of thought. And here's one very interesting thing. Well, when it comes to ideas, divination, there's a big aspect of communication. You have to be able to translate what you get, first of all, into something that is cognizant for yourself, and also something that can be worthwhile information for the other. So here's the thing. We're using these, I'll use the tarot cards as an example. We're using tarot cards. These very, very abstract symbols. And I think I said that in another video. Tarot cards, they are not road signs. They are symbols. A road sign has one definite signification, and it means that and nothing else. Whereas a tarot card, it's a horizon. It's a door unto the world in and of itself. Every single one of the major arcana is like the difference between the Latin and Greek, or the difference between English and Russian, and so on and so forth. They all express reality itself with its own in its own terms, with its own imagery, with its own symbol. And so we get into these symbols that really basically they're meant to shatter the limits of our imagination so that we can see further, we can see deeper, we can see into information that we had not previously conceived. We can think things that we didn't think. We can have perspectives that we had not imagined beforehand. And this whole question of language, so you're going something further out than your own limits, than the limits of your own language. And this is why, divination is so much more used with images. And I could talk about tarot, I could talk about tea leaves, cloud gazing, crystal gazing. Now that's something visual for you. And so on and so forth. So you have this language of symbol ideas, of imagery that kind of pops up to you, and then you have to make sense to that. It has to be translated into intelligible terms for ourselves and also for the other person that we're divining for, if that's the case, if you're not doing it for yourself. An interesting example that I like to bring up in such cases, synesthesia. Synesthesia, it's a psychological, usually it's considered a problem. It's when people, they tend to see sounds or they would hear colors. Essentially, it's when a part of your brain resonates with something that it's not. So the part of your brain that deals with audition will be mixed up with the visual circuitry. Excuse me. Pardon me. And so it'll deal with the visual circuitry, and then you would be able to hear those colors. There would be a tone that goes with it. Or if you're listening to music and then you close your eyes and you have this kaleidoscope of imagery that kind of pops up into your mind, and you're just seeing the music with incredible vividness. So we have that. I would say there's a little bit of that in divination too, because we have this information which is essentially otherworldly. It's something that's not contained in language necessarily. Whether you're the universal matrix type of person, or whether you're that universal intersubjectivity type of thing, or I would say inter-universal subjectivity type of thing. You're translating these non-human information of which the world is made of which may already exist for some reason. Once again, that could be teleologically, that could be causally, that could be synchronistically, that could be providence, so on and so forth. So all of this information that you tap into has to be translated. There has to be some sort of human way to express this non-human information. So this is where poetry comes in. This is where art comes in. You know, if you go on Wikipedia, you can find the list of Delphic oracles that have been said throughout the years. I think I should add that link. It's really, really fascinating how the oracle at Delphi's, what she would do is that she would basically be in a cave with volcanic fumes coming out. Then it would get her completely buzzed on these fumes, and then she would just blurt out this incredible poetry that would have some sort of relationship to the inquirer's question. And it's always been incredibly vague, and people say, well, you know, everybody knows that divination isn't true because it's vague, and therefore it can apply to so many situations, and you kind of project what you feel on that particular meaning of the situation. And well, that's really an unfair statement, because the idea of divination at the basis is to transcend these very definite, this is this and this is that, and we are in a small box of reality and we can't get out of it. The idea is to see outside of the box in order to have that much more freedom, that much more perspective on reality. And of course, poetry will be a big one. It's going to be a huge influence in divination over the centuries. Poetry, in essence, is the use of language to convey meaning that language cannot convey. The idea of it is it's to have thoughts and to use words in ways that words were never used before, to combine those words, to combine those elements of strict, definite meaning, like road signs, and to kind of just pass through that like you're passing through beautiful scenery in your car, and you're just going right out there into the scenery of language and having all of this meaning, all of these ideas that were not there before. So of course, when people will be, particularly charismatic diviners, they will be able to master this language with a lot of tactical wordsmithing. And, once again, it's not fair to say, oh, yes, they purposefully make things abstract or vague so that you project your meaning into it. But there's so many abstractions and vagueness that diviner could have chosen for that particular moment. And it turned out that the symbols, whether the tarot symbols, whether the hallucinations of their volcanic fumes, whether the imagery in the tea leaves looked like a dragon and not like a rabbit. All of the possibilities that there would have had to happen, the diviner made a choice and chose to convey that vague meaning, because it was that vague meaning that was, according to the diviner, the most appropriate to use for the situation. And that goes to say that divination is a very human skill. It's a spiritual skill. The divination is not something that can be found in the tea leaves. It's not something in the cards. The cards, what are they? They're cardboard and ink. The runes, what are they? Well, in my case, the runes they're wood and varnish and heat, where I carve the runes into my own. Into my own pieces of wood. But the point is, the material itself really isn't useful. The idea is to stimulate the human imagination, to stimulate creativity, to go past language, to get that information, and then to provide a medium to translate it back in. Which is why so many books on the tarot, they'll say, well, let yourself be inspired by the imagery. What do the symbols inspire you to say? What is the story behind it? And also, it's the same reason why the divination medium will be used with what is known as the fundamental building blocks of reality. I was talking about the letters, but there are also many divination systems that use number as its own as its fundamental building blocks of society. Of course, standard numerology would be one, and it can use either Neo-Pythagorean numerology or New Age quackery number significations or whatnot. It doesn't really matter at this point. You have the I Ching or I Ching. I don't know how you guys pronounce it in English, and geomancy, which is also based on number. Kibomancy, if you're using dice, and so on and so forth. Interestingly enough, the pendulum can be linked to number, can be linked to letter. Ouija board, letters and numbers together, fundamental building blocks that you combine that, and you kind of bring out that meaning, bring out that information that is beyond our immediate grasp. Now, of course, all of this is a little bit abstract, so I'm going to try to bring it a little closer to home. Now, imagine this. Probably all the bars are closed where you live, but you're going into a bar, and then you come into it, and the first thing you say to yourself is, whoa, the atmosphere here is really tense. It doesn't make me comfortable. I'm going to go drink somewhere else. And then you find another bar, and you're like, wow, okay, this place feels homey, it feels friendly, it feels like I want to have a drink and have a talk with the next guy. Well, there you go. You are doing divination. You come into a place and you access information that is not necessarily available to you. Because what do you have? What information do you have when you get into a room? Well, you have a whole bunch of light that goes throughout your eyes, and you have the music, and so on and so forth. Where do you reach out for that information? I postulate that it's the part of the brain that is in contact with a little bit more than just the senses, a little bit more than what meets the eye. Now, of course, I say the part of the brain. Most people will say, well, it's the instinct, it's the intuition, it's the feeling that I get in my gut, the gut feeling, and so on and so forth. But essentially, whether I say it's the part of the brain or whether I say it's a feeling in the gut or anything else, your human body is actually translating that information in a way that can be used by who we are here and now inside our bodies. And so it is the process of getting that information and translating it in a way that is usable, in a way that you can communicate afterwards. I have on my sheet of paper, I talked about Wittgenstein a little bit. Well, I wrote about Wittgenstein. I don't really remember what I wanted to say about it. Wittgenstein was a philosopher that said all of the problems of humanity are essentially a problem of language, and it's language puzzles. And as soon as you can solve the language puzzles, you solve the person's problem. Which is true to a sense. It's true to the extent that we are kind of like stuck in this world of language. Some of us, most of us, we humans are living in this virtual reality, a virtual reality created by language. And I think I could say that's what the whole point of divination is about. Divination is about transcending that language, going beyond that language, those symbols, those cultural symbols that have of which we are impregnated, that we use to translate reality. Divination will simply give us information to question that, to reorganize the letters of our reality, so to speak, reorganize our language in a way that we hadn't thought of it before, in a way that was not possibly conceived for us or by us, and then to go one step further. Now, there is this whole question of predictability in divination. I was talking about how it's supposed to be vague, and it's supposed to have some creativity to it and some new perspectives, etc., etc. It also has to be in relationship with what's going on with the question. And of course, the skill of divination is, number one, being able to, I wouldn't say pinpoint, but to direct that inspiration, to direct that creativity towards what we want to get, towards, or at least from what we want to get, or from the, from the causal chain, from the chain of meaning, from the reasons to which we're going into, from all of these little coincidences that have meaning between them. So it's the idea of, I would say, of focusing your attention at the right place and focusing your to direct your creativity and direct your imagination to basically get where you want to go, to get what you want to have. And just reviewing this, making sure I talked about everything. Yes, okay. So living in a world made of language, divination is a language in and of itself, but it's a language, much like poetry, that's meant to expand, that's meant to go away, that's meant to open up on different symbols. Now, if you have a person that is really that has a limited vocabulary, that has a limited mastery of language, that their language is a second language, like myself in English. It's a second language. I search for my words. I have a tendency to express my phrases in a way that people would do in French, for example. When you have that, your thought, the way your thought is organized, will organize your language, and the way your language is organized will also organize your thoughts. So basically, when you are in divination, you disorganize your thoughts, you disorganize your language, and then you reorganize it in a way that brings back some meaning. And it's not a question of, is it true or is it not true? Remember when I was saying this whole thing about this objective reality, there is one objective reality, and if divination was really true, then it would work 100% of the time, because there is one truth, and this one truth is really real. And if you can't get that reality, well, actually, that's a very monotheistic way of viewing reality. And even if you're an atheist, you can be the worst atheist, well, worst. not a bad thing to be an atheist. Sorry about that. What I mean is, even if you are the most hardened atheist, if you have the belief that there is only one reality and one truth, and there is one universal set of the laws of physics, and all of the universe obeys that laws of physics, well, you might be an atheist, but you are actually a monotheist, even though your conception of God is non-spiritual, it's strictly material. Excuse me. This is not the coronavirus. I think I've been speaking too fast. I've had people asking me what it is that I'm drinking. Well, excuse me. Last week I had my coffee mug. It was coffee. This time it's a little bit of bourbon just to help with the throat. Not much. Anyhow. Excuse me. Anyhow, where was I? Ah, yes. This whole idea that we are to go to transcend this language, we are not going to get some objectively pre-existent truths and then we're bringing it back. We're going into a world of language in itself, a world of relationships. And those relationships are constantly changing. There's a relationship between causality, teleology, and synchronicity and free will and so on and so forth. There's always an interplay of relationships between that. But even if everything is just causality, if we look at it, if we look at the world as an infinite number of ontological points that are in relationship with each other, even if in a purely causal world, we can say that there's a constant interplay between these causal ontological points, and that there's a constant change of where that causality is headed anyways. So divination will not ever bring objective truth or anything, but it will bring language, it will bring perspective, it will bring ideas, it will bring perspectives. Never will it bring, this is going to happen like this. Now, I say this, but it is also a false thing to say. Never say never, they say. Because sometimes causal streams or causal circuits or causal chains of events are indeed embedded in stone. And sometimes there is an end goal to something that's happening that's very, very clear. I would say the most typical of that is someone who is with a violent or very unhealthy, toxic, abusive partner. And then they end up having, one abusive partner after the other. Well, there is an end goal to that. They're going to have to learn that lesson at some point. And most of the time, divination will have that come out of the tarot draw or of the pendulum's answers or whatnot. Most of that will come out. So there are things that are more obvious, but most of the time, reality is nuanced and complex, and that's why divination's answers will also be nuanced and complex, and will be in a language that has a tendency to transcend our own perspectives and transcend our own linguistic limits. Hence the vagueness, hence the poetry, hence those symbols that it's a rabbit or a dragon, but there's no definite meaning what that rabbit or dragon would mean. Hence why it's not like a road sign. Hence why everything is vague. So divination doesn't take away our subjectivity to make it objective. It takes our subjectivity and it expands it. It increases the number of variables. It increases the number of variables in our consciousness to have a more complex and more complete perspective of the situations that we divine about. So I guess that pretty much covers it. That will do for today. I will be seeing you in a week. I think there's a few links that I have to put at the bottom if I remember correctly. And I wish you an excellent week, everyone. Take care.